All right, going to go over the test real quick so that if you're doing the retake or you want to know what you missed, kind of answer some questions here. So the first question says which expression is equivalent to, and then they give you a bunch of terms. All I have to do is combine my like terms. Okay, so if I'm going to figure out what's equivalent to this, I just add the things that I can add. I can add x's to x's. I've got 9x and I've got a minus 2x. I can combine those like terms right there. 9x minus 2x is 7x. And then they've got this other x over here. So I got 7x plus 1 more x is going to give me 8x. All right, now this negative 5 is a whole number. I don't have any other whole numbers. And this 4x squared, there are no other 4x squared. So I would just leave it like this. I can't add apples and oranges. Those are not like terms. So that would be my final answer. So combine your like terms, figure out which answer actually looks like what we just got here. All right, now this one probably looks familiar. This is the question about a ribbon, and what they've done is they've cut it just like in our example. If you think back to the notes, they give us a certain measurement here of a ribbon. They say it's 96 centimeters long. Well, they've told us that one of the pieces, it's cut in two. One of the pieces, wherever they cut it, we don't know, is 5 times longer than this other piece. Okay, so I know that I don't know what this piece is. I just know this one's 5 times longer, and when you add those two pieces together, you get 96. Okay, they want to know the shorter piece of ribbon. In other words, I'm going to take what I know. One side's 5 times longer, plus the other side, it equals 96. I'm just going to solve for x. So I would just add these two together, and that's going to give me 6x equals 96. And then to solve, I would just divide by 6 on both sides, just solving a basic equation from that point. All right. Now this question, some of you did not have this counted against you because one of the questions actually didn't make sense. They said that both containers were filling up and they would have never crossed. But we have these two containers, one that are full of water. It says a container has 400 gallons of water, and then another container has 800 gallons of water. And we just have to look at what they're doing. It says the first container is filling up at a rate of 5 gallons per minute. So it's filling up. You're adding 5 gallons of water every minute, and they call that minutes x. Okay. At the same time, the second container starts draining water, okay, at a rate of 7 gallons. So the 800 one, the second one, is draining, and that would be subtract if I'm losing something at 7 gallons per minute. Right, and that's how these two would look. Now, how long would it take for them to have the same amount? In other words, equation. I'm trying to figure out when would they be equal. I just compare those with an equal sign, because eventually they would cross paths if one was filling up and one was draining. So just think about what makes sense. The 400-gallon pool is filling up. The 800-gallon pool is draining water. Okay. All right, now this one was probably one of the most missed questions. It asked for the 2 steps that I would use to solve this equation. Now I've got to get rid of negative 2 by adding 2 to both sides. Okay, so obviously add 2 to both sides. We see that here, we see that here, so I can narrow it down to 2 choices right off the bat. But the question becomes, once I get rid of this 2, I'm left with negative 3/4 x equals 10. Okay, now how do I get rid of negative 3/4 times x? All right, well, we usually, to get rid of multiply, we divide, but remember, when we talk about solving an equation, how do I divide by a fraction? Well, dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So to get rid of negative 3/4, I actually have to multiply by the reciprocal, negative 4/3, to cancel, so that those will cross cancel. So what I'm doing is essentially I'm multiplying both sides by negative 4/3. So that's what answer I'm going to look for. The one that tells me I'm adding 2 to both sides, that was the obvious step. But I'm not dividing by negative, well, I'm dividing by negative 3/4, but I'm not multiplying by negative 3/4. I'm multiplying by the reciprocal. That's how we divide by a fraction. Okay, so pay attention to that when you're looking for what they multiplied by. It's not going to be this original fraction. It's going to be flipped in your answer. And that was probably hands down the most missed question on the test. All right, now we got this question here, just like in our examples. You have a baker who sells a certain item, and remember I said we don't need this number here. I'm just talking about the money that they have. They sells a box. They spent $10.50 on a box of cookies and charges 24 cents for each additional cookie. So we can call cookie C or X or whatever we want to call it. If Marshall has $20 to buy the box of cookies, so we know that he's got 20 to spend. He's already spent $10.50, and now he's going to spend 24 cents more for each additional cookie. So I would just solve this equation for C. I would just subtract $10.50 from both sides and then divide by the 24 cents. So I just had to know how to set the equation up. That's the hard part. Once I get it set up, it's easy. Just remember, I don't need the fact that a box of 12 cookies, that's not a part of this equation. I just need to know how much he spent. He spent $10.50 for the box. I'm just trying to figure out of whatever he has left over, how many 24-cent cookies can he get? All right, and here we have an expression, and there were two questions on this. One was asking us what the 50 represents, and the other asked us what the coefficient represents. But this one says it's the amount of money Bentley has left after buying M magazines. So he was buying M magazines. So I know that that's what M stands for, magazines, but they don't tell us anything about 375 or 50, what it means. They just want us to kind of figure out based on this expression here. So 50, obviously if you're going to buy something, you have to have money. This would be, and most of you got this right, would be what he started with. That's how much money he has. He's got $50, and they don't tell you that. You have to figure it out because they're taking away from what he has to buy something. If you're buying something, you're spending money, so he's losing $3.75 for every magazine that he buys. So when they ask for, if they're asking for the 50, the constant, it's what he started with. It's the money that he started with. If they ask for the coefficient, and remember, coefficient is just the number in front of a variable, that represents the cost of the magazines. Okay, so just make sure you figure out which one's which. And coefficient, there's another question on that eventually we'll see where they just ask for a coefficient. All right, now if they give you something like this, they're telling me to take these three terms and subtract these three terms over here on the right. Now remember, if you're subtracting something, if I'm subtracting terms, subtracting is going to change the sign. I've got 5u to the 5th power on one side. I'm subtracting, pay attention to what that sign's telling me to do. I'm subtracting a negative 2u to the 5th. When you subtract, because I can only combine the like terms, but when I subtract a negative, it becomes a positive. You can only take away a debt by adding. So that's going to give me 7u to the 5th power. And if you're trying to eliminate choices, they all say that, so it doesn't really help me. But I've got 4u to the 3rd power. And I'm subtracting a negative 10u to the 3rd power. So 4u to the 3rd, subtracting a negative again, 10u to the 3rd. Let's see if this helps us figure out the answer. All right. Subtracting a negative makes a positive, and that's going to give me 14u to the 3rd power. So looking at answer choices now, I automatically can say, well, it's either this one or it's this one, because they both have 14u to the 3rd. And then I've got a negative 5. If I'm looking at just my 5s here, I've got a negative 5 subtracting a 2. Two negatives just give you more debt. You're taking a 2 away from what was already a negative 5. That's going to give me negative 7. So I'm looking for an answer. Oops. I'm looking for the answer that has a negative 7. Well, this one is the only one that has the negative 7 that I need. All right. Now, here we have a just a basic graphing, but first we had to solve this equation before, or solve this inequality before I could graph it. So I have to look over here on the left. I can combine my like terms. 2k minus 5k is negative 3k, but something happens here. I have to divide by a negative, and remember, anytime I divide by a negative, it's going to flip the inequality. This here is going to flip. So now it's going to be going this direction. The negative 3's cancel out, and I've got k is greater than 2 negatives divide to give me positive 8. So I'm looking for something at positive 8. I'm looking for a graph that says k is at positive 8. That's negative 8. It's definitely not that one. Negative 2, not even close. But if I look down here, I've got positive 8, and I know that it should be an open circle. So I don't even have to know what direction this thing goes. This one is a closed circle, so I know it's not this one. But I'm looking for things that are greater. Greater is always to the right, and because it's just greater than and not greater than or equal to, it's an open circle. So it would have to be this graph here. All right, now this one was an inequality, and they were asking us to pick all of the answers that were actually solutions to this. So it gives me a little bit more to kind of look at, but I would just solve this inequality. I've got this 5a to distribute. I would distribute that. That's going to be 5a minus 20 is less than, oops, that 0 went up there. All right, 5a minus 20 is less than negative 8 plus 8a. All right, now I just got to finish solving this inequality. Combine like terms if there are. There are no like terms on the left or the right, but I can get my variable to one side, so that'll be my next step. And I'm going to get rid of this 5 by subtracting it because it's smaller. And that's going to give me negative 20 is less than negative 8. And then 8 minus 5a is 3a. And then I would just go ahead and work through this until I have solved the inequality. Got to get rid of this minus 8 by adding it to both sides, and that's going to give me negative 12 is less than, those cancel, 3a, and then I have to divide by a positive this time, so I'm not flipping anything. So once I get my answer, though, I now know that a is greater than negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. So I know that's my inequality that I'm talking about. So all my a values are going to be bigger than negative 4. So when I'm picking answers, I'm going, what's bigger than negative 4? Well, 7 is bigger than negative 4. Negative 2 is actually bigger than negative 4, because when I say greater than or bigger than a number, I'm talking about on a number line. If you were to put those on a number line, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, anything in this direction would qualify as greater than. Negative 7, no. A lot of people pick negative 7 because they're like, oh, it's bigger than negative 4. It's actually not. It's further to the left. It's a bigger debt, but it's not bigger in value than negative 4. All right. Negative 14, also not. Negative 4 is equal to, so it doesn't count. So there are only 2 on here that actually are solutions to that inequality. And just plug them in and look and think, is negative 4, if I were to go back and plug these numbers in, is negative 4 going to make sense? If I take that as my answer, is negative 4 less than, let's say I put my answer 7 in here. Is negative 4 less than 7? Yes. Is 7 greater than negative 4? Yes. So it works. All right, now here's the one that probably looked real familiar to you. We're talking about a server job and a hostess. All right, the hostess jobs makes $500 a week. That's a set amount. It makes $500, no more. That's it. Now the other job, the server job, makes $350, but you can also add the tips to that, whatever you make. Okay, so I know what that's going to look like, $350 plus tips. Now they want to see what it would look like for the server job to pay more than the hostess job. How much tips would you need? Well, I want the server job to pay more than the hostess job, so I want this one to be greater. Remember, he always goes after the bigger value here, so that's what I want this to look like. Okay, and for some reason a lot of people kind of miss this one too. I'm not sure what was confusing or kind of giving us the hang up here. All right, now coefficient. Coefficient is just the number in front of the variable. So if I'm looking for what is the coefficient, they said, of the n squared term. Well, the n squared term's right here. What's in front of it? Well, what's in front of it was negative 2. That's the coefficient. It's just a fancy word for the number in front of a variable. All right, this was the question I didn't count. because we had not gone over it. But if you get to this question, and it's asking you, what are they doing in step number 2? Well, the first one here, what did they do? Well, they have to get rid of that -6. So they added it to both sides. If I'm adding to both sides, that's the addition property of equality. If I'd been subtracting, it would be subtraction, and so on. Just what are they doing? Okay, are they adding to both sides? Are they subtracting from both sides? All right, I just need to kind of figure that out. All right, another one just very similar to our notes. They give us an equation with some dollar amounts. Solve this like you would solve any normal equation here. If you want to take the zeros off of that, it's I can. It's not going to change anything. $6 plus $3 times n minus 1 equals $30. Now solve that for n. That's all they're asking us to do. They tell you what all that means, but at the end of the day, they're just asking us to solve this. Okay, so follow your order of steps. Remember, distribute would be the first thing I always look for. Bring everything else down. All right, then I would combine my like terms if there are like terms, and I do have a 6 and a -3 on this side. I can combine those. 6 minus 3 is 3. And then I would just, from here, it's just a 2-step equation. I would just subtract the 3 from both sides. That's going to give me 3n, because these cancel, equals 30 minus 3 is 27. So when I solve this, divide by 3, I get n equals 9. Okay, and that's all I'm having to do is just solve for n. Go back to our steps for solving equations. All right, now here's one that tricked a lot of people. Now, I told you they're not going to give us always a number in these things. They're going to give us expressions, but they work the same. I have 3 sides to this triangle. They're obviously not equal. This is not an equilateral triangle. But how do you find the perimeter? Well, finding perimeter, you just add all the sides no matter what shape it is. Okay, now they didn't give us a number, so I can't come up with like, oh, the perimeter is 20. But they did give us an expression. I can combine these. Now I can only add like terms. Okay, so if we look at 6x, I can add that to x, and I can add it to 5x. Those are all like terms. I can add apples to apples. So 6x plus x is 7, plus 5 more gives me 12x's. But this 2 over here, there is no other whole numbers to add, so it would just stay positive 2. Oops, that slid down. All right, so it's just going to stay plus 2. That's the expression for the perimeter. I don't get an answer. I'm not having to solve anything. And that's pretty much it. Good luck on your retest. If you have any questions, let me know. I am opening that today.